Hi, everybody. That was a really high bar to follow, so don't expect much from me. I'm Julia. I'm an alcoholic and a polysubstance user. I use they, them pronouns. I'm calling you from Alaska tonight. I have this really hot, raspy voice right now because I've been sick for 2 months, which is just wild to me. Yeah. So Raven asked me to come and talk at your meeting, and I'm really grateful to be here today. I have a couple few days put together, as she mentioned. My recovery anniversary from alcohol use is 11/1/14. So I just celebrated 10 years the day after Halloween, which sort of sets the stage for that story, right? It should be a good one. Um, I've always been taught to qualify myself, but I feel like I spent a lot of years qualifying myself. We'll still start from the beginning, right? They say to share the first time, the worst time, and the last time. And I can't remember the first time I took a drink, but I can tell you that the first time that I smoked pot, I was 8 years old, and I was at the roller rink down the street from my parents' house. Raven knows it well. And I went into the bathroom and there were some teenagers in there and they were token up. And I said, I know what you're doing. My parents smoke pot. And they thought that was really hilarious. So they said, do you want some? And I said, of course. And I got really high. And I can't tell you much about it except I fell down a lot and I laughed a lot and I ate a lot of nachos. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. Best thing ever. I didn't start being a 24/7 wake and baker for many, many years. I really started drinking sooner than that. And so I was probably like 11 or 12 when I started drinking on a daily basis. Like a lot of people do, I was stealing liquor from wherever I could find it. I thought I was really clever. My dad liked to have white Russians. I thought it was funny if I called them Caucasians. And so I'd fix myself some when I got home from school and I would sit in the living room sipping on my drink and reading some Proust or something like that because I was highly intellectual and I just wanted to get drunk by myself, alone and read. And it went on like that for a couple of years. And as that was going on, so was a lot of other stuff in my life. And I mean, long story short, really, what it came down to is that by the time I was 14, I was homeless and drinking and doing drugs. And Raven and I didn't meet for a couple more years after that. But by the time we met, and this is where polysubstance use comes in, I don't, any of you who will do whatever it takes to have a good time know what I'm talking about, right? It was anything to get out of my body if I was feeling terrible, but also anything to get into my body if I wanted to have a good time. And so I would go to parties and everybody would dump their pills in a bowl, and I'd just take handfuls of the pills and wash that down with whatever liquor was around. And I couldn't tell you much of anything about what happened most of those nights because it was usually people's like heavy duty psychotropics because our friends ran in that kind of crowd, right? Um, the first time I went to a 12-step meeting, I was 18. Um, and it was in our hometown. And I walked through the door and I thought, this is not where I want to be. The God talk wasn't working for me. I had been kicked out of the church when I came out, and I had a pretty disastrous breakup with God at that time in my life. And I walked into a 12-step room and I saw God talk everywhere. And I walked right out of that room and I got really drunk. And then I spent another 20 years getting drunk and getting high. The polysubstance use kind of started to peter off by my late 20s, I think. And and when I say polysubstance use, I mean anything from like designer drug kinds of things. If the people around me had them and would give them to me for free, I wasn't going to pay for my drugs. Or, huffing gasoline if that was the only thing that I could get my hands on. I just had like a really bad flashback the other day of huffing gasoline in my friend's garage and passing out and having one of our friends come up and just be like, I'm so disappointed in you. And I remember feeling really distressed that they were disappointed in me for passing out, not for huffing gas, right? Um, anyway, this goes on and life went on. And I am an extraordinarily privileged person. I come from a stable family system. There was, interpersonal violence in my family system, and there was alcoholism in my family system, and my parents love each other a lot, and they loved all of us a lot, right? And so, though I moved out early, and though I had some of that violence in my family system, I also had support. I had um, a family that helped me out when I finally turned to them for help at 19 and said, I sure would like to stop being unhoused. I sure would like to stop being a sex worker. I sure would like to think about what it means to get my GED and maybe go back to school. And my parents bought me a plane ticket to come back up to Alaska because by that point I, of course, had done a couple of geographicals to move at one point after a partner that actually Raven and I shared for a little while. Um, and and when I got back to Alaska, my mom picked me up at the airport and she drove me to an apartment that she had rented for me because she would not live with me. She did not think that it was a safe idea for my younger siblings to live with me. It was just no good. But, we had the family resource to put me into housing. And I think it's important to say that because I was unhoused for probably 5 years, but I know a lot of people in program that were unhoused for a lot longer than that. And it's hard to get restabilized, right? So I got restabilized and I kept drinking. Raven and I reconnected. I'm trying to leave out some of the stories that are really hers to share, but there were a few years there where we didn't talk for a while. And we got back together and we started running and gunning as hard as we had been doing before. And I think that, like our friend group and the people that we were surrounded by and the intense trauma that we had experienced, and also the drug use and the substance use was a really good thing for me to like create barriers around my need for recovery for a long time. Because I would look around me and be like, yeah, I'm not that bad. I'm not dead. I'm not crashing my car every weekend. Oh, wait, okay, I crashed a couple of cars, but uh, also ended up in the hospital with sepsis. And oh, wait, like maybe I am that bad, but I would always figure out a way to make myself not that bad. And I was the kind of person who could sometimes control my use. So I was often like the designated driver. To me, that would mean like I would drink a little bit less than everybody else, not that I would be sober, right? And I was the person that took care of people when they got really fucked up, and sometimes they were the people that took care of me when I would get into bar fights. That was my like go-to. Yeah, I'm little. You can't tell from this, but I'm 5'4", maybe. I'm probably less than that. And I would pick fights. I would go and I would find my friend Jill and I would say, "Let's go to the bar where nobody agrees with us and start drinking and see if we can get into an argument." And I just really like, I don't know, I didn't want to be alive, but I didn't want to be dead either. And I wanted to feel something, but I didn't know what I wanted to feel. And the thing that felt most familiar to me was pain, right? Like spent a lot of my time navigating pain throughout my life. And if it was physical pain, I could do a little controlling of that. Whereas the emotional pain, forget that. I just shut that shit down, press it down really, really hard, right? Um, anyway, I think that's a lot. Uh, so first time, worst time, I don't really know what counts as the worst time. Like I spent so much time fucking and fighting, I couldn't tell the difference between the two of them. I was just like, I have no idea what's going on here, right? Um, Last time, I would say frequently qualifies as my worst time in that I got beat up really badly that night. And I had had a miscarriage a couple of days before. I had been not drinking or using for a lot of months because I was pregnant. And then I had a miscarriage. And I was 38 at the time. And I got into like a throwdown drag out with the dude that I was with at the time. And he was pretty fucked up too. And he kicked me around the house a lot, and my scalp got ripped open, and I got stuck outside in the snow and locked out the door because I was wild. I mean, I was picking up anything that I could get my hands on and smashing it against the walls, and I broke a bunch of shit in his house, and then he locked me outside in like a t-shirt in the cold, and the neighbors called the cops because I was screaming and bleeding. And the cops got there and they were, really like, sorry, let me pause there for a second. I don't have a lot of love for law enforcement officers. My apologies to any of you who may work in that field, but I don't have a lot of love for law enforcement officers. So the fact that they treated me kindly in this moment was sort of a big deal to me, right? They treated me kindly. They helped me pack my stuff. They were going to stick me into their car and drive me home so that I wasn't screaming and bleeding outside in the snow. And instead of doing that, I bit them, spit on them, kicked them, and they still were going to drive me home. But then I kicked the headlights out of the guy's truck right in front of them, and so they arrested me for criminal mischief, right? Not the only time I've ever been to jail, but the last time I went to jail, knock on wood, where's some wood? Okay, there's a lot of wood here. Um, and I spent the night in jail, and I woke up the next morning, and my foot was ripped open, and my shoe was filling up with blood, my glasses were missing, and I had called the numbers that I could remember, which were like my parents who didn't pick up, Raven who didn't pick up. It's okay. Um, my parents' neighbors who did pick up at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, "Can't help you," right? Um, I didn't call my husband. But I did walk to his house at 6 o'clock in the morning, all beat up, and say, "Hey, I got into a fight with this guy last night. Can we go pick up my car?" And it was at that moment when I was looking at my husband and my child, who must have been like 4 at the time, that I was just like, something's got to change, and it's me, and I've got to change in a really big way. And so I had a deep gift of surrender when I went to those meetings. Now, Raven didn't mention that the reason that she was. Sometimes I tell this story and it's funny. Tonight I just feel sad. So Raven didn't say that the reason that she was down in Anchorage was that I was gonna kill myself. That first, like, I want to say the first week really was the first 3 months, right? The first 3 months, every single night, I thought, I don't really have any reason to live. Everybody's going to be better off without me. This wasn't the first time in my life that I considered suicide. Absolutely not the first time, but it was probably the worst time in my life because it was so overwhelming and persistent, and I would have the means in front of me. And the thing that made me not die was that I had a coffee commitment at my 12-step meeting. And so every day I would be like, well, I could kill myself today, but they're expecting me to make coffee at the dry dock. So I should probably wait another day and I'll go and I'll make coffee. Um, I'm going to fast forward here a little bit to say that my first 2 years in the rooms, I found a sponsor very quickly. They said pick somebody who has what you want, and I was like, I'm going to pick somebody that's going to boss me around because I don't like bosses, and I know that I'm really stubborn, and I'm going to try to figure out a way to get out of this. And so I picked the first person who said things that said things out loud that I wanted to be able to say and felt too ashamed to say, I think. And she was a boss bitch, and I knew that she was going to help me, and she did. And she was also not a great fit for me for long-term sponsorship because, as a queer and gender expansive person, as a person that carries the ideologies that I carry in this world, I did not like going to meetings that told me that I needed to wear a dress. And I did not like going to meetings that told me I had to read the black. And I did not like going to meeting spaces that did a lot of the things that I think many of us understand can be really harmful in 12-step programming. But man, I needed a place where I could go and listen to other people and get outside of myself for a little while. And so I did, and I worked the steps, and I thought they were bullshit. And I especially did not like that I needed to do all of these things that some stranger was telling me to do. And then she asked me to go to a 6 a.m. meeting, and I thought that was a really terrible idea. But I went to it, and Raven will laugh about this, but I sat in that meeting hall. It's the Alano Club here in Anchorage. And I sat in that meeting hall slowly getting sober, sorry, let me try that again. Slowly waking up. I was getting sober too. I was slowly waking up, drinking my coffee, looking around the room, thinking, this is really familiar. Why is this so familiar? It's because it was the place that we used to go and do drugs all of the time, a place called The Wave when I was a teenager. And I had dropped more acid in that room and had more parties in that room than I had recovery at that point. Um, but that meeting, as well as some dedicated home group meetings, really helped me out. And then there was a time when I was like, I'm not sure that 12 step is the place for me. Again, in, traditional AA settings, the God talk really bugs me. It's funny because my husband that I mentioned earlier is a minister. So I'm like married to a minister. I have deeply spiritual people in my life, such as Raven, and I am a profound agnostic. I'm like, you cannot tell me that there's an answer to anything. Literally nothing. I don't believe it, right? I want to be centered in the mystery of unknowing for the rest of my life. And so I left 12-step programming for a lot of years. And um, I have the fortune of having a program of recovery that uses lots of things. I believe in harm reduction. I believe in therapy. Like I am a therapist and I need a therapist. Um, and I never in a million years thought that I would be where I am right now. So I'm going to fast forward even more to say um, I ended up coming back to 12 step because, the trauma doesn't stop. Like I have a complicated family system. I've got a couple of young people in my life who I've been raising since their older sister, who was their parent and who was my best friend in childhood, died of alcoholism. They're now in their 20s and they both have fetal alcohol syndrome disorder and also chronically unhoused and also have had like just a lot of hard shit in their life, like a lot of hard shit, right? And I'm their trusted adult. And because I'm their trusted adult, I'm the person that gets called when there's a bailout that needs to happen or a pickup from the hospital or any of those hard things. But I'm also the person that gets called when they have a baby. And I get to be there and like catch that baby coming into this world and be a part of their life. And I even got to adopt one of those babies. It's wild to me. Somebody in this world thought a fucked up, drunk and drugged, aging punk anarchist like myself would be a good person to parent. But I mean, I feel like I'm doing an okay job. They're all alive. I haven't put them in the blender yet. I think about it sometimes. I forgot this meeting was being recorded. I probably shouldn't say things like that. Uh, so let me tell you what recovery has brought me. I can be by myself. Um, I spent a lot of years trying to like be a really social person because I thought that that was what I was expected to be, I wanted to have friends. I wanted to fit with community and I would commit myself to all kinds of things and go out and do all kinds of things. Even in early recovery, I kept on trying to do those things because I thought that's how we're supposed to be in the world. But I'm introverted. I like to be alone. When I was using, I couldn't be alone because I would just use myself to death. And now I can be alone and I feel good and calm with myself and my heart. And I can be with other people and I mostly feel good and calm. And I can be with myself and my heart. And recovery brings me that. I would love to say that everything in life is, as they say, happy, joyous, and free. But, I'm also a person who, as I've mentioned, has significant trauma. I grew up lower income. I am not, I'm like pretty financially stable at this point in my life, which is just wild to me. Like, I went to night school, I got an undergrad degree. I lived with that undergrad degree for a long time and a very massive chip on my shoulder about people with other letters after their name and paying for school and all of those things. But I went back to school and I got a master's degree. And then I had a chip on my shoulder for a long time because I'm like, "Ugh, why did I have to go to school and spend all that money that wasn't mine and get a master's degree?" And so I waited 10 years before I got licensed. And I and then I got licensed and I spent a lot of time working for other people and being told what to do, and it turns out I'm not very good at that. So another gift of recovery is that I got to do some discerning around that, and I helped start a nonprofit a number of years ago that helped house LGBTQ plus young people. That nonprofit continues to exist, and I got to gracefully exit when I started to be burnt out, right? And then I got to do a little more discerning and say, what do I want to do next? How do I want to be in this world? And I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a therapist because I was like, again, all of my history of substance use, people were like, you would be so great, specifically doing substance use counseling. And I was like, that's cool, but that is not what I want to do. I just want to talk to people about death. So, blessings to those of you who are here remembering loved ones tonight, too. I know I heard somebody mentioning about their parent earlier. I have 13 people in my life who have died by suicide, like close, tight people in my life. My younger brother died in an alcohol-related accident nearly 20 years ago. And over the years, every single year, we have more of our friends die. And sometimes they're dying from this addiction that gets a hold of us, and sometimes they're dying by their own hands, and sometimes they're dying because it's Alaska and people do real dumb shit trying to get out there and have a good time, right? But the gift of being a griever means that I can be with other grievers. And I tried to stay away from therapy because I was like, the mental health industry really hurt me too. And the mental health industry was part of the place where I started doing all the pill popping, was because people were like, here, take this pill and it will fix you. Take this other thing and it will fix you. And it turns out that I'm not broken, right? Like I've got some deep cracks that have had to be knit together, but I'm not broken. And it also turns out that people really like it when their therapist says, I'd like to disrupt this inherent hierarchy between the two of us because this is really about your journey and I'm just here along for the ride. I hope that we can get through it together, right? Because we deserve peace and we deserve wellness. My marriage is way better than it ever was before. My partner is also sober, works a program of recovery totally different from mine. Um, we're poly and we nest together and we own a home. But here's another wild thing about recovery, and I'm going to sum up here in just a minute. I mentioned that I had my recovery anniversary at the beginning of this month. Well, last month on the 16th of October, I turned 48. I did not think that I was going to live this long. I was pretty sure I was going to die at 18. Then I thought I was going to die at 25. Fast forward, I decided that I probably wasn't going to die, so I had to figure out how to suffer through this world. 38, I got through all of that suicidality, and I'm like, okay, now I'm alive. Some of my dear friends were continuing to drink themselves to death, so I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get this far, and I got this far. So that's wild. But also, at 2 o'clock in the morning on my 48th birthday, while we were all sound asleep, somebody crashed their car through the wall of our house. And I thought it was an earthquake because we have a lot of those here. But then I went and I looked out the window, and my house was surrounded by cops with their guns drawn, and a car in my home. And you know, I didn't have to drink or use over it, and that's fucking wild to me, right? It's so. And then the next week, my 14-year-old had knee surgery. And let me tell you, I have not had so many painkillers at my easy disposal in years, and I did not have to take those painkillers. It's so crazy, you know? Uh, the election night happened, and I was sitting here at home and buzzing and wanting to vomit and all of those things. And I boop, 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 took my feet to a meeting and I sat down and I was annoyed because I know the people in that meeting, and I know that they don't feel the same way about the world that I do. And I was pissed that I was there, but I listened, and I got some relief. And I got to come home and talk to my partner and think about how to find hope in the world. So, if you're early in recovery, if you're in your first few days and you're not sure that this is the place for you, this meeting or other meetings or structured systems or people that tell you what to do or books that you have to read or any of that stuff, if you think that it's not the place for you, I just encourage you to keep on trying, keep on coming back. If this isn't the right thing for you, find something that is, because the world needs you in it, and sobriety looks great on you, and you're all really fucking hot. So, the end. Thank you.